For those of you just joining, great to see some familiar names. We'll get rolling here in a minute or so. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Perfect. Just give another 30 seconds for the last few to join in. And we'll jump in. We've got a couple of good interactive sessions for us this afternoon. Welcome. All right, let's jump in. 6:03 Pacific. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. This is the fourth in the series of really a great partnership here with Bank of America, helping to demystify and answer a lot of the questions we're getting now, especially as we're coming through what we hope is the tail end of COVID here. But really, it's been a pretty incredible time. You know, we've made a lot of likenings to 2008, 2009, where, you know, lots of uncertainty, and those that had that Rockefeller glass half full approach really saw some, you know, pretty incredible opportunities, low lease rates, long-term successful leases that ended up 5-10 years later being well ahead of some of their peers that signed a few years later. So really looking forward to it. Tonight, we have some very special guests. First of all, Jason Tyson, the Senior Vice President of the Western US, who is a 13-year veteran and is really an incredible resource. If you haven't spoken to him in the past or any of his team, they are incredible at helping to figure out business strategies, business plans, cash flow, and helping to give the right guidance to make sure that you've got the right loan at the right time. Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. In addition to that, one of our specialist senior consultants working with me throughout the entire Western US market, Matthew Donato, to join us with some key real estate updates, trends, and some analysis. Mr. Donato?
Great, thank you, Eric. Pleasure to be here.
Great. And myself as the president and managing partner here at Cirrus Consulting Group, I would encourage, as a bit of a moderator this evening, would encourage you to use the Q&A sections. We'll help to answer as many questions as we can. The last 3 sessions, we've ended up going a little over time because of the questions. So in the Q&A is the best place to list them out. We'll try to answer them as we go, or certainly give some time towards the end. Perfect. Looks like some great joining us here this evening. So we wanted to basically help to customize tonight, right? No shortage of Zooms and webinars over the past 12 to 16 months. What we'll do is pull up a quick poll now to get a quick sense and help customize the content. So what you can see in front of us here is a couple of things. Number one is just the purpose of joining us today. As a reminder, there's no CE credits for the course, but we will be going through some fantastic updated tips and tricks. So again, purpose, general knowledge, looking for guidance, right? Help with the lease, or curious about market rents or the loan market, the lending market. Number two, which is very helpful, your current situation. These obviously won't be shared publicly, etc. Current situation. So are you looking to buy or build? Are you looking to expand or relocate? Are you thinking of transitioning? We've had a lot of that, working with some of the practice brokers throughout the country. No shortage of doctors contemplating now next steps as a result of COVID. Or I'm looking just to double down and potentially extend my lease, or potentially now maybe now's the time to buy my unit of the building, or hey, you know what, I'm looking to renegotiate my lease, why not refinance at the same time? A couple of quick questions about lease expiry. And talking about leverage, we'll really talk about, do we have more or less leverage as a result of what's changed in the real estate market? And then also, I know a few of you have already reached out and filled out the risk analysis. There's another section here. Again, if you're not sure or concerned about some elements of the lease, certainly myself or Matthew or one of my colleagues will be able to help assist, or getting some update on the rental rates, because it has been pretty wild over the past 12 months. Perfect. All right, so let's jump in, shall we? Lots of personal clients or otherwise contemplating opening their first practice, really looking at the fear, the concern, and really looking for some key guidance on how that process works. So we're going to help to, with Jason's assistance, help to overcome some of that fear through getting some great internal best practices. Perfect. Great to see some Q&A already jumping in. Okay, so purpose, process, and payoff for this afternoon. Number one is to get some trends and real estate updates and a little bit of the crystal ball into the future. We'll talk about, not to be leasing experts, but to at least get a different perspective and look at how we look at the office lease, and also touch on some of the $100,000 traps. That's typically one of the biggest pieces of feedback, post shutdown, was as everyone laid off their staff, the number one hit to overhead became the lease. And at that point, a lot of people realized, well, hey, where is my lease, right? And where is it? What does it say? And why should I still have to pay rent even though I'm shut down? And in addition to that, let's talk about what the lenders are looking for, sort of the insider's perspective on it. So again, for those of you that haven't joined one of our courses in the past, welcome. We're pretty unique. Cirrus Consulting Group is the only healthcare specialized tenant representation firm of our kind in North America. So we have been 27 years in the business, over 12,000 successful leases negotiated. So it's very unique. We typically get the phone calls whenever there's a lease issue or situation. And our team is pretty incredible. We have in-house legal, leasing, consulting departments. And from that perspective, normally, Jason and I are in some of the many different booths across the country, helping to be in person, which we look forward to getting back to as soon as possible. So from that perspective, in terms of commercial real estate intelligence, so some of the main components here is, first of all, where's the data? One of the main suggestions I can certainly make are data is key. And as you start the negotiations, as you start to think about how do I compare what's fair market rents, one of the best things you can do is to get an updated demographic report or an availability report, or to see, right, with different partners about what those rates look like. And we have access to now through our software internally and licensed to over 95 billion square feet. So let's jump into what some of those data is showing us today. Quick reminder on forward-looking statements. Our crystal ball is as good as yours. So obviously no promises or commitments as to what the future has to offer, but some of the software will look at some of the analytics over the future. All right, so Mr. Donato, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. So, really what we're looking at here, number one, we're going to look at the national market rent growth. So, moving into 2020 with some of the impacts of COVID and so forth, we did see a drop in some of the rents. Now, that is on the incline right now since about partway through 2020, moving up through 2021. Realistically, looking at a lot of the trends across the Western United States, it is being seen right now that growth is occurring, it is increasing. But then looking at some of the availability, you're seeing a steep trend here. The actual availability in the market is rapidly increasing. And that does bode well for those of you on this evening's call that may be looking at starting your first practice or adding an additional location, or even relocating your first practice. That availability is increasing, and the desire to retain you as a tenant moving forward is a very key aspect right now in many of the landlords that we're interacting with. Now, when we're looking at the national leasing activity, year over year, as we can see through this, since about 2011, it's been in the high 400 million square feet that are being leased across the country. Now, as we move into the 2020 and 2021, we're taking a look at that, and it is making a larger decline. Right, we dropped actually over 100 million square feet, and even further when looking at it from 2019 to 2021. So a large aspect of this really does have to do with some of the implications of COVID. Some of those of you that may be in the strip malls or the office buildings, you probably have noticed that vacancies are increasing. And through that is creating some of these aspects we're looking at now in terms of dips within the market rates and the vacancy rates. So just to give yourself somewhat of a snapshot on some of the locations here, and of course, if any of you on this evening's call are interested in learning about your specific market, your specific submarket, like Eric said earlier, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Eric. We'll be happy to connect with you and go through this on a very case-by-case level. So looking at Arizona here, for example, and Phoenix specifically, you can see that the vacancy rates have fluctuated quite a bit, really keeping in line with what I showed you in the past two slides. So, however, where we're seeing in some markets, looking at Los Angeles here, that the actual market rent never really fluctuated all that much. It's still on quite the high incline. And whereas looking at LA, there was a bit of a slope, and now it's coming back up. Right? So what that tells me, and what you can read into that, like we said, we don't have the crystal ball, but based on some of these calculated projections, getting into those negotiations or getting into that space sooner rather than later is proving to be advantageous, because what we're seeing right now is that market rate is on the rise, and getting in while it's still a little bit lower is going to prove far better for you in the long run.
Also, I've got 3 active projects in LA currently, and it's also the locations that you never thought would become available, right? Multi-generational type of restaurant or otherwise, end cap units that become perfect for the dental unit. So as that rise in vacancies has cropped up, and different demographics and people moving from state to state right now create some pretty unique opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely, Eric. I mean, looking at some of you that may be in the Bay Area, some of those locations that you never thought were going to be available, that were completely full for such a long time. Now all of a sudden those prime locations are coming available with that high foot traffic. That's just the nature of the beast that we're dealing with right now. Right now, also looking at Portland and Seattle here. Now, once again, we're seeing that in Portland, there is a projected little bit of a dive off. You see a little bit of a drop at the end of 2020, recorrecting itself. And those vacancy rates staying very high, coming back only, 1% or 0.1%, and still going and then coming back down. So getting in while the vacancy rates are higher, that's going to prove advantageous for you. And we're seeing the same thing in Seattle as well.
Perfect. So from that perspective, we're going to keep moving pretty quickly here. Got lots of great stuff to run through. Again, as a reminder for those of you that just joined, feel free to throw anything into the Q&A and we'll cover those as we go. Here's one of the best tips and tricks I can give you is, as you look forward to your next lease, let that be an expansion, renewal, new start, acquisition, right? Where you're buying the practice, there's still the lease is a major component that unfortunately is usually the last thing thought of. It's the last, oh, you know what? Yeah, I guess I got to assign that lease. But look at it a little differently. When we run these types of seminars, we go around the room and ask, what really is it? But when you look at the monthly payments multiplied over the course of the year, increasing by 3 or 4 or CPI, and God knows what that's going to be with all the inflation. Right? What does it really mean? Well, looking at over 10 or 15 or 20-year period, for many of you, can be a multi-million-dollar commitment. So ultimately, what is it? Right? As we can see, ultimately it is a check, right? And a Bank of America check at that. So from that perspective, I'd like that, Jason. From that perspective, right, we really need to look at that. So when you think about that next lease, what an amazing business to be a landlord. Wow, you know what? Hey, only $3 per square foot, $2.50 a square foot, right? Yet in actuality, they're recognizing potentially, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in terms of their long-term commitment that you've just committed to that 10-year lease. And, from that perspective, gives you a new way of really looking and comparing through here. All right, so from that perspective here, now looking a little forward. So for those of you that own, I would caution you on a couple of particular things. Number one is, first of all, it's important. And a lot of you that may be looking at transitioning, you want to maintain ownership of the practice, of the building and sell the practice, then the lease can become a very integral part, meaning that you want to make sure that you have a specific document separating your corporation that owns the building from the corporation that owns the practice. And that's good for a few reasons. Number one, to make sure that you're paying fair and equitable rents, right? You don't certainly want to have different expenses on different sides for a variety of reasons. And number two is certainly to be able to help to ensure which business is responsible for what. Right, in the north, right, who's responsible for snow removal, etc., trash collections, where does that liability fall between those two? So a clear lease delineates between. And another big one is, again, if something were to ever happen to you, then that lease becomes very important. We were involved with a file where there was a husband and wife that owned the building, right, and the husband was the dentist, and an outside partner owned, right, the minority share of the practice. Well, the doctor unfortunately passed, so it then became the wife, right, with the associate, with the partner, and there was no lease in place. So as you can imagine, it created a ton of unnecessary strife. So to have a properly structured lease well in advance of eventual transition is certainly a main component. And there's pros and cons to each, but certainly if you do have or don't have a lease or may have downloaded something, right? Very important to have it dental specific and thinking about towards your transitioning. In some cases, it might be unlikely that brand new associate would be unlikely to be able to pay you $750,000 for your unit, right? Or the real estate, plus pay you $1 million for your practice, right? So in many cases, it may be also a nice form of passive form income for you to maintain the property. So now let's switch gears a little bit, talking about leverage. Leverage is the $1 million word these days. So take for a second the switch gears with the landlord. Look at yourself through your landlord's eyes. You, in my opinion, are the best tenant on the planet, bar none. Why? You have a less than 0.5% default rate on your lease. Build out costs in the Bay Area, as we were just talking about, can be well over $400 per square foot, right? Which instantly becomes the asset and a leasehold of the landlord, right? And certainly you're there for typically on average about 26.5 years that the practice stays in the same location, right? And certainly bring in high quality traffic. And also, right, with different lockdowns or otherwise, there's an element of being COVID proof, where people are still going to the dentist when restaurants and other components are still in a level of shutdown. So really, when you compare that, think about how you can take advantage of the current market situation. A lot of clients love the concept of have your cake and eat it too. So as you're looking forward about, is now the right time to contemplate expanding? Is now the right time to think about a satellite location? Jason, is now the time to potentially really look to grow, maybe buy another practice, for example? Where does that really fall? One of the key aspects are to try to do both, right? A lot of clients that are just typically looking to perhaps renew, well, why not just put the fishing pole in the water and see what that landlord down the street would want to do in order to earn your business? We were involved with a file recently where simple renewal turned into the landlord down the street with a highly vacant practice or a highly vacant strip mall. That landlord ended up offering over $283,000 to entice that doctor to come over and build out and equip a new practice, right, from where she was. And imagine that landlord so wanting to get rid of retail and bring in medical, dental, or vet because, right, of the consistency, the high quality foot traffic, right, as well as, right, such a rock solid tenant. So a few components here. Number one, the 7 main financial negotiables. So this is another key component where, as you're thinking, let's say looking at your first practice, there's a number of key components. So often the doctor just focuses on base rent and maybe the annual increases in the term. Yet there's so many other valves, if you will, to help increase and to help maximize some of your savings. Of course, annual increases, even a 0.5% reduction in annual increases can be savings of 10 or maybe even hundreds of thousands over the next or over the long term that you're in that practice. Common area maintenance. We wrote a great blog article recently that touches on what should be reasonable expenses and what are unreasonable expenses. And unfortunately, a lot of people pay upwards of 1/3 or more on common area maintenance expense. That is negotiable. There can be things such as a CAM cap, so it can't exceed more than a certain percentage per year. Or, for example, audit rights, giving you and your professional team the ability to audit the landlord's source documents to make sure, in fact, that what they're charging you is accurate. In addition to that, fixturing, right? And a lot of people, look at it a little differently, but that really should be the time that you get the keys as you're building out to the time that your lease commences. That should be therefore rent-free. And then after the lease commences, that should also be a period of free rent, depending on the amount of time and commitment you're giving to the landlord. Now, the big one I wanted to focus on is tenant improvement allowance, TIA. A lot of the courses that we've done in the past and with Jason and his team, I call it a bit of fool's gold. Be cautious. Don't forget, the landlords are not in the lending business. They're typically, if they offer you $20, $30, $40, $50, $70 per square foot, I had a file on my desk this morning, be cautious, right? That's not free money. The landlord typically takes that amount. You might think it's great, $140,000, great, that helps to decrease the amount I need. But where does that come from? Typically, it's baked into the rent or the annual increase. So it can become this amount that gets built in that increases every single year. When you go to renew your lease in 10 years, what happens? Your lease keeps going up and up and up. So it becomes this amount that keeps ever increasing and could potentially leave you at 10, 20, or recently we saw 30% above market rate in terms of rental rates. So in many cases, right, part of the strategy is, hey, what if we took $0 in tenant improvement allowance? And what if we went to Jason and his team to say, hey, what if we needed an extra X amount, right, on a set fixed rate versus taking all this money from the landlord, right? How much less could we get that base rent down? And some of the software we use can track exactly all these different variables to help maximize your savings over the long term, right? Don't just think month one, year one, really start to think about all the way through to eventual transition. Perfect. Okay, so some of the importance. So this is the case study. The case study is a great component that, again, for those of you following along in your lease, is a great component to look at. So this is the option to renew clause. It's found in almost all leases, about 90%. So just take a quick moment and scan through. For those of you driving on the 405 right now, don't, or on the 101, don't read, but take a quick second for those of you that are on your laptops. All right. At this point in the course, Matthew and I usually joke and say, who enjoys reading leases? Which is very few and far between in the dental community. All right, so let's see what you found. So first off, right at the very beginning, provided that Dr. Joe Black shall remain as the tenant, meaning that the lease, and this is very common in leases, especially in California, where the options are personal to the original tenant, meaning that it's great for you, but if you were to sell your practice at year 9 of a 10-year lease, You might have 2 further options to renew, but that becomes an issue when the landlord says, oh no, right? That's only for, right? That's only for you. Now, suddenly that doctor, right, who's about to sell only has a year or 2 left on the lease, right? And then it's the buyer who's going to come in, go to Jason and say, great, I want a long-term lease, but whoops, the only lease I can get is only going to be a year or 2, right? And certainly as it comes to term, as Jason will touch on, right, typically it can be upwards of the underwriters needing 5 years worth of term in order to help ensure that there's enough runway for continuity and predictability of revenue, which ultimately is the value that if you're looking to buy, that's what you're looking to invest in. Another component here is default. Be cautious of default. Some of you may be in default and be unaware of it. What we saw last year was a lot of doctors that made changes, brought in contractors, right, cordoned off some of the operatories, etc., and made alterations, which without landlord's prior written consent may put you in default. That's in the alteration section of your lease. Also, in some cases, if the landlord, if you asked for help for a month of deferral or otherwise, and the landlord asked you for financial statements, and you said, okay, all right, no problems, I'll no problems, I won't ask for any help anymore, here's my rent, right? But if in your lease there was a specific clause that required you to send it to the landlord within 15 days, that can also be used against you in the term of default. What does that mean? Well, a whole host of things, but in some cases, it can ensure that your option to renew becomes invalid and becomes null and void. Some other components here midway through, any such renewal shall be on the landlord's current standard form lease. Look out for that. What's the point of negotiating a lease if suddenly, right, now you've got to pay that back, or more importantly, that it then comes to a new standard form lease. And also the other big one here is that in no event shall it be less than the rent paid in the last year of the original term. It's like we're in Santa Clarita and Six Flags, and you're on the world's most boring roller coaster that keeps going up and up and up and up and up. There's no chance to ever get it adjusted back to fair market rent. So again, cost of this mistake can cause the inability to sell, or can certainly cause some significant issues and put too much control back in the hands of the landlord. This is a perfect example of an example from a doctor who sent us this from what he thought was his friend, was a doctor next door. And this was a letter that he got. So it stated here that, as you know, your lease expires on November 14th, 2018. Pursuant to section 2.4 of your lease, you had an option to renew the lease for 5 years at market rate. However, you're required to give me written notice of your intent to renew no less than 6 months prior to the expiration. This was minutes that expired, right? And therefore, you did not send it by May 14th, and I think this was May 16th, right? So please be advised, my broker is going to come by today and insert a for lease sign, which they did, in a conspicuous but non-intrusive place on the premises this week. Oh, by the way, if you still want to stay, have your people call my people, right? This doctor had just built out an entire new practice, was 4 years into a 5-year lease with 2 5-year options. And right, all those options became null and void because they missed the option to renew deadline. So doctors, right, tonight, please put in two specific numbers into your phone. Number one, when does, in terms of the dates, right, when does your option to renew deadline occur? What date? And number two is, when does your lease expire? Those are 2 critical dates to be aware of. And ideally, right, we recommend starting the process 2 years out so that all the negotiations can be done prior to that option to renew deadline. So in the essence of time, this is certainly a section, feel free to screenshot, etc. If you're not sure about any of these clauses, surrender, you have to return the practice to pre-dental condition if you were to ever leave. Overholding. If you are in a month-to-month situation and you think, okay, great, boy, that's better for me, be cautious. The landlord may have the right to increase it by 150 to 200%. That happened to me in Marina Del Rey, where unfortunately, right? I didn't re-sign the lease. I went month to month and they bumped my rent by 150%, right? Same thing can happen in commercial. So again, if you have any questions or concerns with these, we're happy to assist. So what's the solution here? Start early, start often, right? Plan, prepare, and prioritize your goals. What landlords typically do, well, you reach out early. What happens? Oh, we're busy. Oh, it's too soon. Oh, it's COVID, right? Oh, wait another 6 months. Suddenly now you've missed the option to renew deadline. You're into the red zone here, right? And the landlord's won. Don't fall into that trap. As we wrap and pass it to Jason here, it is a pretty unprecedented opportunity. We're seeing some pretty incredible deals occur from Anchorage to Honolulu to Key West to Halifax and everything in between. So long-term lease renewals, right? Resetting to current market rents are key. Financing, right? I mean, again, it's some of the lowest rates we've ever seen in our lifetimes. Equipment, and of course, landlords. Landlords are very anxious to be filling those vacancies, getting back to normal, perhaps sharing, mixing up the tenant mix, right? And moving things forward. So some of the strategies and what we found out over 27 years is this. It's a simple 8-step process. Number one, make sure that you have all of the documentation, meaning that if you don't have a signed executed copy of your lease, countersigned by the landlord, and if you bought your practice and the lease was assigned to you, then that original lease from 1986 is still the governing document today, as it's just renewed and been amended each and every year. So, if you don't have it today, PPP or anything else, all the doctors just emailed their landlords, hey, please send me a digital copy. They'd get everything back to them typically within the hour. Number two, before engaging, think about your goals. Think about your transition plans. Think about your exit strategy. Think about your growth strategy. What does that look like now? And how does that impact, right, the lease, right? Which can be either a great help or a hindrance, depending on how it's structured. Review the office lease for risks. If you haven't had it professionally reviewed before, can't stress enough to at least, if nothing else, just know what's in there. And then number four, get the facts, get the data. Show what the comparable rates are for the closest 20 vacancies, right? And to make sure that you've got a much more comparable one. In Vista, California, we were recently able to reduce the doctor's rent by over 30%, 30% rent reduction. Why? The doctor originally signed the lease, right? Without any help, every single year it went up and 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 up. And by the time we got involved, right, it was such a gap to market that we were able to negotiate not only the business terms, but also these financials. And then again, number five, figure out that it's a carefully choreographed game of chess, right? You want to be thinking 5 or 6 or 7 steps ahead, right? But unfortunately, what do most doctors do? They say, oh my gosh, I just saw this webinar with Jason and Eric and Matt, and I skipped sections 1 to 5, and I picked up the phone and I called the landlord. Mr. Landlord, how much do you want to charge me? Right? Being a little tongue in cheek, but really make sure that you go in well prepared, assemble your professional team to make sure that regardless of the situation you're at, right, make sure that you've got the full game plan from start to finish. So as we pass it over to Jason, as mentioned, in appreciation for your time, we do a complimentary analysis, rental review, and critical dates and risk analysis to review your lease. Again, we waive the fees for that in appreciation for your time. We then schedule that with you to go through the rental rates as well as some of the issues within your lease. So to make it easy, there's a quick little poll that allows you to request one of those. And from that perspective, really now, as you look forward, right, what you're trying to avoid is to look back in 3 months or 3 years to say, you know what, shoot, I wonder if back then was the right time to relocate. I wonder if back then was the right time to secure a new long-term lease. So from that perspective, quick little poll. Again, are you with a lease today? Current expiries. For those of you in a month-to-month situation or contemplating selling within a year, certainly mark that it is an urgent situation. If your landlord is trying to push you out, if the landlord is trying to put in another dentist right next door, highly suggest you let us have a look at the lease, look for exclusivity, use provisions, or other components in the lease that can help to protect your production. From that perspective as well as a perfect transition, question 5, right? For those of you that are thinking about, hey, should I refi? Is now the right time to make that expansion? To speak to a representative from Bank of America's Practice Solutions. So on that note, I will pass it over to the one and the only Mr. Jason Tyson.
Awesome, Eric. I truly appreciate that and appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody this evening. I summed up play chess, not checkers with your lease. So that was awesome. Really appreciate being here. If you're not too familiar with Practice Solutions, we're a boutique division within Bank of America that specializes in dental financing. That's all we do. That's all the team and I do. We're pretty dedicated and committed to it. And you're probably wondering, why would Bank of America be so committed to this industry? And it really talks about some of the things Eric was talking about earlier, is that you are the best tenants and you're also the best borrowers out there. Your default rate is less than 1% and still outperform any industry that we work with, and we love working with you all. Our portfolio today, after 23 years in business and doing this, it's at $7 billion, and out of that $7 billion, it's still less than 1% default, even with the challenges that we had with COVID. I don't think any business is bulletproof, but I think it is COVID proof, and we've done a good job. We've rebounded, we got out of it, and there was a lot of silver linings with it. And if anything, I think some of the practices got even stronger than what they were before. And we set a lot of your peers, and maybe some of you folks that's sitting on this call today have made some moves and are in a really good position and better than you were before. You are one of those Rockefellers, which is awesome. And I admire everybody being on this call today. It's really great. I mean, you could be spending time with your family or friends, and you're sitting here talking to a lease negotiator and a banker in the evening, an hour of your time. But even though I'm a banker, I truly believe that the greatest return you'll ever get is the ROI on yourself. So the investment you make in yourself, and you're making that investment here in yourself and your practice. So let's dive into a couple things here. We can skip the agenda, Eric, and just move into what does a typical buyer look like? So what does a typical client look like for you, Jason? Here's what we're looking at. We're looking at practice ownership as well as the associateship. So practice ownership, we work with clients that have 1 year of ownership all the way to 30 plus years of ownership and everything in between. Being in this business for over 23 years, we're blessed to offer some products. Whatever part of the life cycle you're in your practice, we can help support that, and I'll dive into that. If you're sitting on the phone right now and you're not a practice owner in this webinar, and you say, well, am I in the wrong place? No, we absolutely work with associates that are looking to be a practice owner and look to start a practice. I mean, to be honest with you, our competitors aren't the Wells Fargo's out there, the Chases out there, the other lenders out there. Our competitors are corporate dentistry. We are huge fans of private practice ownership and owners that are out there looking to have multi-locations and be their own business owners. So we are all about that. We're committed about that. We're passionate about that. It's own or be an owner, right? So income earnings and collections we're looking at. Of course, we're going to look at what the income earnings are and what your collections are. That's important for us to identify what that looks like. So student loans, this is interesting. This has changed, right? This has changed. When I first started 13 years ago, I saw my first $300,000 student debt and said, what, $300,000 student debt? That sounds crazy. That today is the new norm. If anything, it's light on the norm. I reviewed an application yesterday of an associate out of school 3 years, and he's already got $800,000 in student debt. And it's challenging. It is challenging today. It's creates a little bit different dynamic. That doesn't mean that it's bad or we can't help that client out. But when Susie Orman is on TV talking about debt, right? Get rid of your debt. Get rid of your debt. Let me help understand, or the folks on the call understand that there's good debt and there's bad debt. Okay, good debt is student loans. Good debt is business debt against the practice. Good debt is real estate, your home, that's good debt. Bad debt is that credit card debt, that line of credits, those things. That's the bad debt. So we're going to look at personal debt. And one of the things important for us is cash savings, right? Besides having great partners in this business, we really make sure that we want to surround the doctor with the right team of people, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that, but it's also in the right personal financial situation, and that's a lot has to do with cash. And I think we want to make sure that you had that cash, you had that savings, and you're ready for maybe a rainy day. And not because we require it for a down payment, but we just want to make sure that you're protected there, and that cash savings is important. So this is how we look at a typical client. So let's just give you an example. If you're an associate that's 2 to 5 years out, you're making $150,000 a year. You have $300,000 in student debt. And you have some personal debt of $5,000 because you want that free Southwest flight. And you have about $25,000 to $30,000 in savings, we're probably going to approve that. So that's absolutely a client that we look at. And if you're even stronger than that and well established and in a stronger situation than that, we're going to approve you 9 times out of 10. Let's move on to a little bit about credit, because this is always a question that pops up. What makes up my FICO score, Jason? And what is that all about? I think this is a good illustration of what makes up your FICO score, but please understand that credit score is one factor to it. We're going to look at a lot of different factors, but if you have a 680 or above FICO score, that's a pretty healthy score, and we like that. The 2 major factors that make up your score is your pay history and your amounts owed. There's length of credit history, types of credit, and credit inquiries, but the 2 major factors that are going to make up that score are pay history and amounts owed. But that's only one toll gate. The other major credit is a major C, but the other major C is cash flow. And we're really going to look at the cash flow of the practice as well as your cash is the deciding factors for an approval or not. So like I said, 680 or above, 7 even better, 850, you're doing a lot of things right. So good job for you, and pat on the back. Let's move on a little bit here to
I just wanted to share one quick best practice, Jason, from one of the other sessions. So a lot of new doctors that apply for credit don't know this, but and I didn't know it either. So you may be, $30,000 limit on your credit card. You may be, using $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 that you pay your statement each time. But there's always a balance, right? You're not paying any interest, but there's a balance. So one of the best practices is that I wasn't aware of, but if you pay that all down, right, that obviously dramatically impacts that amount owed. So versus just paying the statement amount each and every month. So interesting best practice from last week. Absolutely.
All right, so if we move on to, so Jason, you've been doing this for 23 years. What are some of the benefits of being in this business as long as you have been? It really comes down to the amount of product offerings that we can offer, as well as the structures of the loans that we can offer with very competitive rates, right? So if you're in a situation right now that you're a well-established doctor and it's time to move, that lease is not as attractive as it was before, you're busting at the seams and you want to move to a larger location, we can absolutely help with that relocation. If it's time to do the second office, absolutely, we'd be able to help with that. If it's time to do the third office, absolutely. I mean, right now we're running a promotion for 2.99 on first, second, or third offices right now, which is unheard of, right? If you're looking just for a facelift of the practice and you want to just do a remodel after this lease, and Eric saved you about $5,000, a year or more in that lease, right? Maybe $10,000, maybe that $8,000 Bank of America check. That was nice to see, right? And you want to take that and invest it back into practice and do a facelift, we can absolutely help with that. Or if you want to expand to the suite right next door and everything in between. Right now, if you're not even looking to move, this is debt consolidation is huge. We see this you get caught up into the practice and the business, and you're running at the speed of light, and you got a lot of things going on. And you may have a practice loan out here, and you got a corporate credit card over here, and then you have a line of credit, and then that equipment specialist sold you on that latest, greatest technology that makes the practice even more effective. By consolidating all those loans and stretching the term out, maybe that's a great opportunity where you can find significant savings. If you're looking to make an investment in equipment financing, we can absolutely help with that. If you're looking to purchase a practice or buy in, we can help with that. Or if you're looking to make that investment in the commercial real estate and everything in between. So these are all products that are available, and there's flexibility with these products. And wherever you're at in that life cycle of your practice, we can help support that. If you want to move on, Eric, just to a couple questions that we have here. These are questions typically that I get about where my situation is today. I'll just share a little bit. Debt, and I touched on it already, but how will the debt, my business and personal debt, impact me? It will. It will. If you had debt into the practice, though, it won't affect it as long as there's room. And when I say there's room, you have $1 million practice and you have about $300,000 of existing debt. You have room to go to about 90% of equity inside that practice that we'd be able to work with. So if you have $1 million practice and you have about $300,000 of debt, and you're looking to do something above and beyond, and you want to take that $600,000 and buy another practice or expand into another practice, you have the ability to do so. That won't affect you. Your home mortgage, as long as it's checked, that debt won't affect you. It really comes down to that credit card debt, those lines of credits that are out there, sitting out there, that could affect you, okay? Liquidity. Good rule of thumb, about 10% of cash and savings if you were to liquefy everything out on what you're looking to borrow. So if you're looking to borrow $1 million, 10%, $100,000 in savings is a good rule of thumb. And production is, it's a little bit different conversation now that COVID, because we know we had an impact in 20, and 15 to 20% impact of the practice that happened in 20. That is okay. We understand that. We're looking at 2019 numbers, right? As well as the interim, or what has happened since the restrictions have lifted. Your practice has been opened back up, and we're looking at those months and how you're doing. So we call that the interim, and that's a deep dive in there. As long as you're strong in 19, you've rebounded in that interim period of 2021, we're going to help you out and support you in a new loan if that's something that you're looking to do. From there, we'll dive a little bit into process, because I think this is important here on, okay, how does project financing, because a lot of you on this call may be in a situation where this lease negotiation is going to open up the opportunity to potentially move into a new space, or you're looking to do another office. So one thing that's important is establish a plan. My dad was a builder. He said, Jason, you'll never have a strong house unless you have a strong what? Foundation. And I think the plan is the foundation. And so many people go into projects like this without a plan, and you need to have that plan. And if you need help putting that plan together, we have templates for you to help put that together, because we know how important it is. We don't require to see that plan for an approval. The underwriters aren't looking at that plan, but we know it's pretty vital to the plan. There's also a quote by Mike Tyson too, who's not a cousin or a relative of mine, but he always had a great quote. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So I love that quote there. But you got to have that plan. My mom would say, Jason, it's just a dream until you actually write it down, and then it becomes more reality in the vision there. You got to establish a budget, and we're happy to help you. Eric alluded to my team. I have 20 business development specialists out there, so practice solution specialists that all they do is work with dentists and veterinarians and medical doctors west of Utah, and they can help support you in that and really help establish what that budget looks like, help you get pre-qualified. So, well, Jason, I don't even know what my borrowing power is. You probably want to know what that borrowing power is, and we're happy to give you that number. What help to find this space? We have a lot of support and relationships on that. From there, apply to financing, finalize your design, create a marketing plan, and start the project. So that's how who helps get this all done, right? That's a big thing. You live in a world right now where you're probably wearing a lot of hats. In this world we have, you're managing a lot of things, and you need that team, right? And two people right here and two organizations here are committed to be a part of that team. But who else would be a part of that team? So Eric, if you want to roll through the actual team itself. Of course, I'm going to be at 12 o'clock because that's a shameless plug, and I want to be at 12 o'clock at the banker, right? You need that money, right? There may be a real estate broker involved. There'd be an attorney involved. There could be a CPA that you want. If you don't have a dental specifically CPA, I highly recommend that. If they're not in this industry, they don't know some of the best practices and understanding of the financials in your specific to your industry. An architect or a contractor, sometimes they wear the same hat. One individual wears two hats maybe. You don't need both. You could just pick one. There's a lot of contractors out there that do the design build, and that's another opportunity for you to save some money. But I will promise this. If you decide to do a project, do not pick a general contractor because they did the plumbing or they did a remodel in your bathroom. They don't understand dental plumbing just because they did a remodel in your bathroom, okay? So you want a dental specific contractor, you really do. An equipment specialist are typically a great resource for you to help really coordinate the project, especially if you embark on a project or a new office. A technology specialist, right? Marketing company. And I don't know why you're over there, Eric. You should be right next to me at 1 o'clock.
10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is terrible.
And then from there, insurance agent. A lot of these people that Eric and I work with, we are happy to make those referrals and introductions to any of these folks, but we all work together as a team to support you. Your success is our success, so we want to make sure that you're successful. One of the big parts of that is having these individuals help support you in that project, okay? And then from there, whether you work with Bank of America or another lender, you said, Jason, you're okay, but I'd rather work over here with another lender. That's okay. I can just give you some education when you're making the selection for a lender. These are things that are important. Face-to-face contact. I know it's a little hard right now, and we're starting to open the doors to this, but that's something we pride ourselves in. Just in California, I have 5 people. If you're in Seattle, I have 3 people. If you're in Phoenix, Arizona, I have 4 people. There's people there that will support you and have that face-to-face contact. And this may be one of the single biggest investments you ever make in your career, right? And you want that person to be there, and we are there to make that contact. Industry experts, right? If it's a lender that's not in this industry, I would want to see that loan that they're proposing. Fixed rates. There's no reason to do variable rates right now. Make sure that these rates are fixed. They're so attractive, but fixed. You don't want to be caught in a situation in a rising rate. Now, for 13 years, I've been promising that rates are going to come up. Every single year in my career, they've been down. If anybody's been in practice for over 15 years, you know what I'm talking about. Some of those rates were 10% plus. I was in a seminar last year when we were actually out there in the field speaking, and I had one gentleman who had a 22% loan, his first loan. Right. But that was 20 plus years ago. So 100% financing, right? You want the ability to have the 100% financing, no reason to put any money down on this. Sometimes we do ask that. Usually that's real estate involved. You want flexible terms. Approach this very similar like a home mortgage. You get a home mortgage loan for 30 years, not because you plan on staying in the house for 30 years. You get a home mortgage for 30 years because you want that low monthly payment. And I would approach this loan very similar, so that cash flow is king. It's about that low monthly payment. Minimal fees. There should be no fees associated with that. If you're endorsed by any of the large state endorsements, we're endorsed by 26 of them. We cut the fees actually in half. No personal collateral. They shouldn't be asking for your house. They shouldn't be asking for your spouse. They shouldn't be asking you for your firstborn, right? There should be no that. It should be a personal guarantee from you, your corporate guarantee, and we're filing the lien against the practice, and that's it. And then whatever lender you pick, if you want to do more, you want to see what their ability is to do more with you. So these are 8 items I would have you look at and make sure that these are These are the things that are important besides rate. I know rate's important. The good news is rates are the best they've ever been right now. Like I said, 2.99. If you're sitting on a 4% or higher loan right now, please make the call to myself, and I'll put you into contact with my local practice solution specialist that will help do an assessment right now and save you some significant money. Okay. And I think I have a couple more slides here, Eric. Just
if I could add just a few things. Similar for the lease, right?
Yeah.
Be cautious about the fixed rates. A lot of leases are going up, 2, 3, 4, 5% per year.
Mm-hmm.
We've been very successful due to COVID or otherwise helping to iron out some of those. Maybe it's 3 years in terms of rates on your lease, right? At a set monthly payment, and then resets over 3 years, One recently, we did one that was the same rate over the full 10 years of the term. Of course, it doesn't happen every day, but those are the components. Be cautious with personal guarantees as it pertains to the lease, especially if you're an established doctor. And really watch where the money goes, right? Who are you paying in terms of commissions or otherwise? Where does that get factored into your rent? So a lot of these similarities in terms of what to look for in a loan is very similar to what to look for in a lease as well. And is it designed for growth? Things like a right of first refusal or otherwise. So
that's right.
Yeah, great alignment there.
Yep, absolutely. These are the cost of doing business. The loan has a value, but your banking relationship has a value as well. So there's certain outside factors that you should consider when making the decision. So you're going to have the loan rate. I would also consider your merchant services as well. There's a cost that every time that credit card is being swiped, and you could be getting you'd be in charge a premium right now where you shouldn't be. Payroll savings, you have some ability to save some money there. Credit card cashback, your business checking account, and insurance requirements. So outside of rate, these are other things that you should think about as well. They all play a factor in it. So somebody may come out with a shiny rate for you, but there's some other costs that you're paying by not maybe going with a lender that offers all of these options, right? And we're happy to be a part of one at Bank of America. So another shameless plug, but just to give you an idea of what that looks like and how important it is, because people just look at, hey, the loan and the rate, yeah, but there's other. The relation with the bank is important as well. So I think I have 1 or 2 more slides, and then we'll open up the questions here. This just talks about the life cycle of the business ownership, right? We're all in. We're fully committed to this. I talked about how strong the portfolio is today, and it's strong because we have great partnerships like Cirrus. We wouldn't be as successful as we were if we didn't have great partnerships with organizations like Cirrus, Eric and his team. It really helps our clients, and your success is our success, as I talked about before, and it just gives you an idea of how committed we are to the industry and how passionate we are about it, and how we're here to serve and help all of you out and be more successfm. So thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. Appreciate being a part of this. I think I got my name and number here. We can skip that if you want. If you want to just contact, yeah, there's me. I was a couple more pounds heavier there. There's my phone number and my email address. And if you need me, I'm happy to be here to support you. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it, bud.
Great, Jason. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. That's of all the presenters, that was the absolute most passion, bar none. We appreciate it, right? It's loans and leases may not be the most exciting of topics, but right, when you really look at how much it costs, let alone what the potential savings or benefits financially to you to make sure they're structured properly, it does get a lot more exciting. So really appreciate that. Lots of good questions rolling in. As a reminder, Q&A. I see some hand raises. I see a bunch of questions. So we'll run those through here in a moment. One of the key questions that comes up is at what stage, right? So you went through a bit of the process, Jason, but one of the questions we've had each of the 3 nights is that, when is the right time? If I'm an associate working at a DSO and I'm contemplating my next step, when's the best time to reach out? And, let it be getting involved with a pre-approval or, before we found a space, right? When's the best time to start with the business plan, right? And, again, step 1, step 2 into the team.
Yeah, if I say if not now, when, right? I'd say start that process just like your philosophy on start 2 years before. There's no reason that you can't meet with a practice solution specialist, start getting network with other folks in the industry that can help support you, start putting that business plan together and really get pre-qualified. So there's no better day than tomorrow to start that process.
Perfect. So another couple of questions here. So I see a few here actually from my old stomping ground, Antelope Valley, for example. So, for those of you that haven't already, about over almost 3/4 have requested a lease review or have filled out the lease risk assessment. That's a great one to figure out what risks which risk you may or may not be aware of within your lease. So looking forward to speaking to you, Dr. B. And others through not too far away from the old house up the PCH. Looking forward to seeing where we're at. So for those of you, again, with leases that are coming up within the next 6, 12 months, 24 months, even in some cases, 30 months in advance, can be the best time to at least see where we're at, right? What the current market looks like. And also, where's the landlord? Are they looking at it as a value play? Are they contemplating perhaps selling it in the near future? What impact does that have to you if the landlord's just looking to flip the building? And there was, I forget the exact number, but there was billions of dollars, right? Just in Southern California of real estate exchange over the past few years. So really looking at that perspective, it's sort of monopoly. Well, you're the tenant looking for continuity and predictability. So really from that perspective, how do you make sure that you can negotiate with, the devil versus the devil you don't know? So if you feel there's a risk of your building being sold, right, it can be advantageous to establish a new lease with the landlord, right, to help have that security to get it done, that if, right, the building then sells, you're not worried about what that new owner may be trying to do. Is it a redevelopment? They might want to relocate you in the practice and beyond. Matthew, a couple of questions about us in terms of services, in terms of, looks like how much does your service cost? Do you charge for negotiating leases? So Matthew, how would you assess some of those questions about what we do and what are some of the billing options?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, we can assist you through the negotiations of your lease. Absolutely. Now, in terms of the fees and the fee structure, it does depend on the scope. So depending on where you are, what the status of the lease looks like, what is the overall project going to look like? What are your priorities going to be through that negotiation? It isn't just a cookie cutter model, if you will. It's a very case-by-case approach. So we want to connect in terms of the fees for our service. Please feel free to reach out to either Eric or myself, and we'll be happy to go through your situation in very full detail, figure out exactly what we need to do for you in order to determine a successful negotiation and come together with you to create much a negotiation treatment plan, if you will, and how to proceed there. And we can always discuss what that looks like in terms of fees and what the upcoming expectations are and so forth.
Yeah, great question. And then Dr. N on that point, really, again, there is no fees for that initial assessment. At the end, we can figure it out. So to piggyback on Matt's point, if we're advising you on how to create the lease, right? If you own the own building, if it is the lease negotiation, is it just an assignment between yourself and the buyer of your practice if you're looking to sell, right? Or is it something that is a full negotiation, relocation, etc.? So again, happy to go through. By the end of the call, we'll be able to give you the options in terms of pricing. But great questions there as well. Some other ones, Jason, you've now 13 years in the business. What would you say are some of the main items that associates or those opening their first practice don't do or could do better? One of the things that I've seen a fair bit is that a lot of associates don't ask or even get a copy of their production statements, right? So they don't know each month it's their pay, but they're not getting those pay statements. So when they come to us to say, well, hey, what's my budget? How many square feet should I get? Right? Also, well, what are you producing today? What's your annual revenue? So other than making sure, and I can't stress it enough, ask for those, right? It's your pay. You should be able to get a print up each and every month to show what your total production is. But Jason, other things from your perspective?
I think one of the main things is working with a service like yourself and working with an advocate or an advisor like yourself that can help them, instead of trying to negotiate the lease through their commercial real estate broker, not another person coming in and make sure that they're working for them. So commercial real estate brokers are great, but they're only going to negotiate to up to a couple points, and you guys are absolute experts to that next level. And you want an advisor that will help really make sure that they're getting the best and most attractive lease. So I definitely encourage that, because it's a big cost. I mean, the reality is, on a startup loan, that's your first time out, I'm going to graduate the payments, and you're not going to really see a payment for the first couple of years as a startup. Right, you're gonna have two major costs: staff, right, and that lease. And we want to make sure that those costs are the right expense, and not putting that startup in a bad situation. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen, and that doesn't help. So having that right team of people that I talked about before, specifically you, is very vital.
No, it's sort of the concept.
You owe me a couple of dollars though after.
I think so. Right, it's a concept of proactive investment versus reactive cost.
Right.
And our approach is unique. We just want to, if for example, if the landlord wants to pay a commission, for example, that's not how we work. So we would much rather see the landlord reduce the rental rates, right, to help save you more of the long run, right, than some sort of upfront commission. So we're not that aspect. We get paid directly by our clients to advise them, to really help to make sure that they've got the best lease possible for their practice, let it be new start, mid-career, transitioning, or owner-occupied as well. Perfect, great. I see almost everyone's still on. Dr. A, I see your hand is still up. Let us know if there's some specific questions you have. One on the real estate questions, Matt. How do you assess rental rates for my area? I'm in a rural location. How would you assess my market rental rate?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Eric was saying right before I started going through some of the market reports there, we have access to billions of square feet across all of the United States. So for any of you that are looking to have that specific report pulled for your location, just let me know. I will go through my proprietary data, and I'll pull a full report on the building, the location, what your certain submarket is doing in comparison to the overall market. And we'll go through that data together, and I can give you a full picture on what your specific submarket and location looks like in terms of rental rates, vacancies, even some basic demographics as well.
Perfect, great. If there's any other questions, feel free to throw it in. If not, just to echo Jason's point earlier, truly, your time is very valuable. We certainly appreciate it. We hope tonight provides some good additional tangible tips and tricks in terms of being able to help look at your lease a little differently, look at your loan a little differently, and to help realize that you have far more leverage than you could ever imagine. It's only how you utilize it. So look, it's, on a personal note, it's such a roller coaster ride. Having spoken to hundreds and hundreds of doctors going through every possible scenario, you're not alone in all of this, right? There are dedicated dental specific teams that are helping doctors just like you, help guide, help advise, right? Many of which, just like the review or conversations, etc., right? These are services that you get great different perspectives, thought-provoking scenarios, right? And really challenging some of the questions about the business, right? And it's worth it to talk and help to establish that professional team to ensure you get the best possible results. So on that note, can't thank you enough. Mr. Jason Tyson, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciated. Look forward to working continually with you and your team. Mr. Donato, thank you for joining us. And thank you all. To the majority of you who are still on, really appreciate your time. Have a fantastic evening and thank you very much. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.